So, yes, here we are in front of the King of India. Don't know if you can see that in the car again. And today we'll be hearing about Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 26. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Astotra Shatashi Shimadis Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Skaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kun Radhikun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Ki Jai Navadvip Mahapudam Ki Jai Gangamai Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Maharani Ki Jai. All glories to all the assembled devotees. All glories to all the assembled devotees. All glories to all the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glories to Prabhupada. So, reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 2, text 26. Atha chainam nityajatam nityam vaman yase nritam tatapi tvam mahabaho nainam shochi tumarhasi atha chainam nityajatam nityam vamanase nritam tatapi tvam mahabaho nainam shochitumarhasi. So the word by word. Ata, if however, cha, also, enam, the soul, nityajatam, always born, nityam, forever, va, either, manyase, so you so think, mritam, death, dead, tata, api, still, tvam, you, mahabaho, O mighty armed one, na, never, enam, about the soul, shochitum, to lament, arhasi, deserve. Translation. If, however, you think that the soul, or the symptoms of life, will always be born and die forever, you still have no reason to lament, O mighty armed. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. There is always a class of philosophers, almost akin to the Buddhists, who do not believe in the separate existence of the soul beyond the body. When Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita, it appears that such philosophers existed, and they were known as Lokayatikas and Vaibhashikas. Such philosophers maintain that life symptoms take place at a certain mature condition of material combination. The modern material scientist and materialist philosophers also think similarly. According to them, the body is a combination of physical elements, and at a certain stage of life, and at a certain stage, the life symptoms develop by interaction of the physical and chemical elements. The science of anthropology is based on this philosophy. Currently, many pseudo-religions, now becoming fashionable in America, are also adhering to this philosophy, as are the nihilist, non-devotional Buddhist sects. Even if Arjuna did not believe in the existence of the soul, as in the Vaibhashika philosophy, there would still have been no cause for lamentation. No one laments the loss of a certain bulk of chemicals and stops discharging his prescribed duty. On the other hand, in modern science and scientific warfare, so many tons of chemicals are wasted for achieving victory over the enemy. According to the Vaibhashika philosophy, the so-called soul, or Atma, vanishes along with the deterioration of the body. So in any case, whether Arjuna accepted the Vedic conclusion that there is an atomic soul, or he did not believe in the existence of the soul, he had no reason to lament. According to this theory, since there are so many living entities generating out of matter every moment, and so many of them are being vanquished every moment, there is no need to grieve for such incidents. If there were no rebirth for the soul, Arjuna had no reason to be afraid of being affected by sinful reactions due to his killing his grandfather and teacher. But at the same time, Krishna sarcastically addressed Arjuna as Mahabahu, mighty armed, because he, at least, did not accept the theory of the Vaibhashikas, which leaves aside the Vedic wisdom. As a Kshatriya, Arjuna belonged to the Vedic culture, and it behooved him to continue to follow its principles. Om Jnana-timirandhasaya Shalakaya Chakshu Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitnamini Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So again, we are reading from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 26. So it's an interesting verse here because now Krishna is making an atheistic argument. And Krishna does this sometimes when the Govardhan Puja Lila was taking place. Krishna started to use the atheistic, materialistic philosophy as one of his arguments, which is the philosophy of, the name just passes me by. It's the person who says beg, borrow, or steal, do whatever you can. No, that's not it. The philosophy is called Karma Mimamsa philosophy. That's it. Yeah. So when Krishna was doing asking his father about the Indra Yagya, he says, what are you doing? Is this from the Shastra or is it just like some kind of blind ritual? And Nanda Maharaj says, well, this is really a tradition, but we need to do it because if we don't please Lord Indra, he won't provide the rains. And if he doesn't provide the rain, we don't get grass. The cows can't be fed, and then we're in trouble. So Krishna said, nah, if you just do your duty, you do the right karma, then automatically the demigods are obliged to fulfill your the karma that you've earned. And so you don't need to worship Indra. You just do your duty, and they're obliged to follow it. So this is a materialistic basic philosophy, which takes away the personalism of things. But Krishna was arguing that philosophy. Yeah, you don't need to worry about any god. You don't need to please any god. You just do the right thing and you'll get the good reaction. Whereas, of course, when we get into chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks a lot about yajna. And it's not just a materialistic calculation. We do this, we get this result in terms of material activities. But no, we actually have to do yajna to Lord Vishnu. And from his blessings, the rains come, the grains come, and all of the good things of life are dependent on the mercy of the Lord. So anyway, that's one example of Krishna speaking a bogus philosophy, you could say, materialistic philosophy. And here again in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 26, he's again presenting an atheistic or materialistic argument. So the translation is, if, however, you think that the soul, or the symptoms of life, will always be born and die forever, you still have no reason to lament, O mighty armed. So the argument here is basically, look, I've spent, Krishna's up to text 25 here. Let's see where he started. He started pretty much in text 11 or text 12 until now. He's just been hammering the point. You are not the body. You are a spirit soul. The material body is temporary and not permanent, whereas the soul is eternal. It cannot be harmed by anything material. It always exists and it always has existed. So he's been hammering this point. And now he's taking another tack. Now he's saying, and even if you don't believe all of these facts that I've clearly stated to you in the last 14 verses, even if you don't believe that there is a soul, that is what's animating the body, that's the real life force, even if you don't believe that, and you think that when the body dies, that's the end of the person, so even if you believe that, then why don't you just fight? Because what's the problem? If it's just a bunch of chemicals, being disintegrated and the person ceases to exist, what's the harm? And therefore, Krishna's using this as another example to say, look, you need to fight. Even if you're an atheist, you can't. I mean, even from the point of view of there being no soul, and then whether there's a soul or there's not a soul, in both cases, you should fight. Don't find excuses. Do your duty. So it's interesting he's saying that he's put so much time in emphasizing that the soul is the real thing. And then he says, anyway, even if you don't believe that, still you need to do this duty, because even if you don't believe in the soul, it still makes sense to do your duty in this way. So another interesting point here is that Krishna has presented the facts that you're not the body, the soul is unbreakable, etc., etc. And still, after giving the evidence, he says, anyway, but if you don't believe that, that's all right. Here's another argument. He's not saying, this is it, and if you don't believe it, then that's it. You're all finished. It's all over. Just like some religions, they say, unless you believe what we believe, then you're going to hell forever. But we can see from Krishna's behavior in this Bhagavad Gita that even when he gives conclusive proof of something, he says, anyway, even if you don't believe that, here's another way of looking at it. Very interesting. And of course, at the end of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, now I've explained everything. You figure out what you want to do. Krishna is always giving us that free will. So just quickly look at the purport here. So Prabhupada's saying that this idea that life comes out of matter is not new. It's dating back to the ancient times. And particularly in the modern time, this is a popular attitude. In the ancient times, there were followers of that philosophy, but perhaps it wasn't as popular as it is now. The modern material scientists and materialistic philosophers believe that life comes about due to some combination of matter, some conditions of physical elements. They can't explain exactly what those conditions are, or exactly at what point the life begins, or how it, how it starts. But this is their belief. And then Prabhupada has a bit of a dig here. He says that currently many pseudo-religions, now becoming fashionable in America, are also adhering to this philosophy. So I'm not sure exactly who he's referring to here, but basically some of these impersonalist movements have this kind of idea. And even the Christians, although they say God breathed life into the, Adam and Eve or whatever, when they created them, and then they came to life, many of them have this idea that when you die, you die. Your body ends, then you stop, you sort of go into, I don't know, there's a lot of weird ideas, I guess. But they think that you'll just die and you'll just be asleep until Jesus comes back. And then the good people will go to heaven, and the bad people will either just be left in the ground or they'll go to hell or something like this. So even Christians who really should understand about the soul, many of them misunderstand this distinction of the body and the soul. And so then Prabhupada's explaining this argument that, if, for example, Bhishma and Drona, they're only exhibiting life because of the combination of chemicals. And then when the combination of chemicals, turns to dust, then they're not suffering. They just don't exist anymore. What's the big deal? It's just a bunch of chemicals. And Prabhupada said that in the modern times, they're wasting so much in modern science and scientific warfare. So many tons of chemicals are wasted for achieving victory over the enemy. This is true, whether you're talking about, bombs, be they nuclear bombs or, traditional, whether it's through chemical and biological warfare, through vaccines and, similar things to that. That this is, the government and the scientists, they spend so much money on these things just to conquer the enemy. So, but then, what Prabhupada's mentioning is that he refers to Arjuna as Mahabaho, as a way of, even though he's arguing that even if you're an atheist, you should accept this idea, he's speaking in such a way as to say, look, Mahabaho, you're a mighty armed warrior. You're a great Kshatriya. Of course you don't believe this nonsense atheist philosophy, right? So he's not presenting the atheist philosophy as if it's a valid argument. He's going, look, even the losers who believe in atheism, still should accept it because of, this is there's no way of escaping your duty. Because the way Prabhupada says it here, Krishna sarcastically addressed Arjuna as Mahabaho, mighty armed, because at least he did not accept this atheistic, materialistic nonsense. So, and so in this way, although it appears that Krishna is presenting an atheistic argument, what he's really telling Arjuna is like, come on, man, you're not, you're better than this. You know that there's a soul. And, if even the atheists, would follow my instruction based on these arguments, what to speak of you, who's actually a great Kshatriya that knows what their duty is. So this is what the purport talks about. I wanted to expand a little bit on this idea of what are the consequences of believing that there is no soul. And there are consequences of that belief. It's very important. I was listening to an interview with this guy, Yuval Noah Harari, and he's quite famous as being a great atheist and a Buddhist. Interesting, isn't it? How they combine together. So this guy, Yuval Noah Harari, is a modern person, right? He has a husband, he's vegan, all the trendy things, and he practices vipassana meditation. So this type of meditation is, basically sitting in silence and just observing your thoughts and, trying to empty the mind, essentially, to ultimately come to a state of nothingness. This is the ultimate conclusion of Buddhism, and this is an aspect of Buddhism. And the Vipassana people, they have these retreats where you go away for like 10 days, and the rules are you can't speak to anybody. Someone just drops some food off at your door, a couple of times a day or something. And other than that, you just basically just sit in meditation all alone. And that's what this Yuval Harari guy does. So it's interesting that he's this Buddhist, which seems like a religion, right? But it's a religion that doesn't have God in it, so it's not incompatible with his philosophy. And he's very sarcastic, this Yuval Harari guy, about belief in God, that, these are all just stories that people make up because they want to find meaning in life, and therefore they create these fanciful fairy tales about, a God or some superior beings, to make them feel better and things like that. So it's interesting. But the conclusion that he had at the end of his speech was interesting because he said that there's a race on at the moment between like technology, AI, and so on to hack the human. And what he means by that is, just like if you go on Facebook, the ads will pop up exactly to do with something you were just talking about, or some uncanny things seem to happen. And it's because based on, what you write in your emails and what you post on Facebook and the things you look at and like and share and all that, these machine learning, artificial intelligence algorithms can figure out things about you, and therefore they can, present things to you that you might want to buy, and present articles that would be of your interest. So what he's saying is that if these AI machines get to the stage where they know you better than you know yourself, then you're in trouble because you can really be manipulated by, this technology. So he said there's a race on at the moment where, in order to not be manipulated by these big corporations and governments, the way he says it, then we need to really know ourselves well, so that the machine doesn't know you better than you know yourself. And he was saying that this technology is something that the Nazis and the Soviets would have dreamed of having, to be able to control people. So we need to know ourselves. And so his solution is, this impersonal meditation. But of course, that's not really understanding who the self is. It gives some sense of the self because when you sit alone with your thoughts, then you realize that actually I'm not my thoughts. My thoughts come and go, and I'm the observer of those thoughts. So this is giving us a clue. But we need to hear from the Bhagavad Gita, or Shastra in general, to understand that we are spirit soul. And what's the nature of the spirit soul? What's the duty of the spirit soul? And what's the, what should we be doing with this understanding that we're the soul? So this is where the statement, know yourself, this is a way to protect yourself from being manipulated. Know who you really are. This is so true. Even though this person who's saying it, this Harari fellow, doesn't understand that part. When we understand that we're spirit soul and that we're not the material body, then we realize that death is not the worst thing. Even if someone kills us, we know that we'll continue on. And therefore we can be strong and stand according to our principles, even to the point of death, because we're not afraid of dying, because we know that it's not the end. But what we are afraid of is not living according to what we know to be right. And again, that's given in the Shastra. So going back to this idea of atheism, when we don't know who we really are, and we think the body is all there is, then there's two responses. For ourselves personally, we might do anything just to preserve the body, because we think that once the body's over, that's the end. There's no more life. And so if we don't think that there's a soul, then where's the consequences for any evil action? We can kill anybody, we can torture anyone, we can do any damn thing without consequences. So this is one of the consequences of atheistic philosophy. That, well, I'm just going to die, so whatever I did in this life is not going to matter. And if we think that we're the body, we'll do everything to protect our own body. I've spoken quite a few times in the previous classes about how this fear, excessive fear of death, whether it's our own or someone we love, our family member or so on, it's the curse of death, the tragedy of death plagueeth the wise. This is, this excessive fear of death is what leads someone to evil. So that's from one point of view for protecting ourselves or people related to ourselves. We may do anything. Or not just even to protect ourselves and stay alive, but just if we feel that my sense gratification is the top priority in my life, then I'll do any damn thing and I don't care. Just like it's believed and it's discussed many times that the very wealthy people, because they have so much money and power, that they perform satanic rituals, that there's a sense that there's no consequences for my actions, therefore I can do anything. I can kill young children and drink their blood. I can engage in orgies and rape and torture, and somehow or other, in a very sick way, these people get some sense of power and energy from these evil acts. Prabhupada talks about that this world is run by rakshasas who eat their own children. So these are horrible thoughts, but this is the consequence of atheism. When you feel that there will be no consequences for your actions, and when you have the power and wealth and influence to feel like you can do it and get away with it in this life, then you'll think, well, if there is no next life, so who cares? This type of Satanism is ultimately coming from this idea that the body and our personal satisfaction is all that matters, and to hell with everybody else. So this is one consequence. Another, on the other side of things, is that when people feel that life is just not worth living, that they're in so much stress and anxiety and depression, they see no hope of any, no hope in life, whether it's in this life or the next. Then they feel like, okay, I'll commit suicide, and just at least I won't suffer anymore. That'll be the end. But unfortunately, this is also misguided, because the soul is eternal, and you may end this body, but by ending it before its destined time, that's considered very sinful, and then it actually leads to further suffering. So the people, they just want relief, but they don't realize that by doing that to their body and killing themselves, they're actually making things worse. And again, it's this atheistic idea. Once the body's over, that's the end. And we can see in modern society this consciousness is being developed more and more. In many countries, in New Zealand, they recently passed a law that made it legal to do euthanasia, which basically means that if someone wants to commit suicide, you can help them to commit suicide. And, in the beginning, they'll make some rules. Oh, when the person's really suffering and, it's a terminal illness that they'll never recover from, then it's okay. But you know how these things go. Over time, it becomes more and more accessible for any reason. Because again, if the body is just alive, is like an illusion essentially, and when the body dies, there's no more person. Then what's the problem? They're suffering now. Let's end it. Then no more suffering. Everything over. Atheistic philosophy. Another aspect of this consciousness is abortion as well. It's not really a living being. It's just a bunch of chemicals. They're literally speaking like that. 1 minute, the baby's in the womb. It's just a bunch of chemicals. And then a couple of minutes later, when the baby's born, suddenly it's considered to be a living being, and then it should be, respected as life and, protected by the law and so on. I mean, even to that point, though, now they're allowing, and again, like I said before with euthanasia, there were strict conditions, only if the person's terminally ill and they're really suffering, da. It's the same with abortion. It used to be, okay, well, abortion is allowed under certain conditions, if it's due to rape or if the mother's life is at danger, there were some specific conditions, very rare cases. When the abortion laws were first brought in, they said that abortion would be something like, they wanted to make abortion safe, because apparently when someone tries to commit an abortion illegally without a proper doctor, it can risk the life of the mother. Just having an abortion in itself risks the life of a mother, but if it's not done under medical supervision, it's apparently more dangerous. But there was a saying, I forget exactly how it goes, but they wanted the abortions to be safe and rare. So the idea wasn't like, oh yeah, now we're going to make it out like abortion is just a way that if you don't want to have a baby, you just, kill the baby, that's fine, for any reason. That wasn't the intention. The intention was there may be certain situations where, it may be required, so we want to regulate it and allow it, but it should be rare. It's just in very specific situations. But you can see how over time now it's considered, a woman's right to kill a baby whenever she wants, because that baby could interfere with that woman's enjoyment of life if, the mother is not allowed to kill the baby whenever she wants. And in New Zealand, the law has been changed, interestingly, at the very beginning of COVID, when everyone was freaking out about this so-called virus and dangerous, disease. They rushed through this law without proper discussion that allows abortion right up to the right up to the time of birth. And if they're trying to abort the baby just before birth and the baby's born alive, they don't have to keep the baby alive. They can let the baby die. All of these really horrible things. But then again, if you don't feel that really there's any life, then it's just a bunch of chemicals. So now they've extended it from, used to be, abortion can only happen in the first trimester or something, and now it's coming up right to the point of birth. And it wouldn't surprise me if they say that once the baby's born, if the mother doesn't like the, the baby's got the wrong gender or wrong sex rather, or it has the wrong, it's got something wrong with their lip or something, that they can kill the baby as long as they do it within the first 24 hours or something. This is the way that things are heading. And again, it's all coming back to not knowing about the soul. It's so important. Prabhupada emphasized the first important thing in spiritual life is to understand about the soul, that you're not the body, the soul is the real thing. And therefore, the things that we do to an embodied soul matters, because there is a real person underneath there that is suffering. It's not an imagination. And there's karmic reactions for us in this life and the next for the actions that we take. So these are a couple of thoughts that I had: euthanasia, abortion. Then, of course, even Prabhupada used to say that some Christians used to think that black people have no souls. And, like they say, animals have no souls. So as soon as you take the soul out of the equation, then it means, I can exploit, because it's just matter. It's not a person who's really suffering here. So, of course, this idea that black people have no souls, or animals have no souls, is ridiculous. We can see them suffering. If you grab an animal, you can see the fear in their eyes. What to speak of cutting the animal and killing it? And so again, as soon as you remove this idea of the soul, then it brings out very bad qualities. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say. There's a chance to ask any questions or comments, or just introduce yourself. Should have mentioned it earlier for whoever's listening. It's good to know who's there. Maybe you have some comment or thought on these subjects. I'm sure there's a lot more to say about it. These are just a few thoughts that came to my mind. So I'll just summarize and give time for anyone that has a comment or question. Summarize what I'm talking about. So first of all, here Krishna is presenting an atheistic argument that what if there's no soul? If that's the case, there's no reason to worry about killing anyone, because it'll just be the end, and there'll be no suffering for that person. But Krishna sarcastically calls Arjuna mighty armed one, Mahabaho, to indicate that, but I know that you don't believe that. It's a stupid philosophy. You're a Kshatriya, so you know better. But even then, if even these atheist people, will follow my instruction, then why won't you, a follower of the Vedic injunctions, follow this? We also see that Krishna's indicating a little bit here of acknowledging some different viewpoints here, instead of just saying, this is the only way, which is quite interesting. And then the discussion is basically bringing up here that this this atheistic philosophy of the Buddhists and modern scientists, the Shunyavadis that is in Prabhupada's Pranam Mantra, the consequence of that philosophy is horrible in so many ways. Animal killing of other races, just killing people in general, abortion, euthanasia. If we don't think there's a soul, then we don't think there'll be any reactions for what we do in this life. So not just killing, but so many other sinful things that people do. If they feel there's no consequences, that there is no life after this, then they'll do any damn thing and just hope they don't get caught in this lifetime. And so this is the consequence of not believing in the soul, and therefore thinking there's no consequences for our actions. Whatever way you want to look at, anything that harms others, even harming Mother Nature. There's no consequence, because at the end of this life, I'll be dead. Not my problem. So this is kind of the main points. Hare Krishna Banu, nice to know that you're listening. And it's been a while since we've been in touch. Hope I'll see you soon. I've been seeing your sister from time to time, but haven't seen you for a while, so hopefully we'll catch up sometime. And thanks for commenting. It's nice to know who I'm talking to, other than just myself. So I think that, just in conclusion, we need to be very clear and strong about this idea that we're not the body, and that there is a soul, and that there are consequences for the actions that we take. And the more that we can inquire and find out about who we really are, what does it mean to be a spirit soul? What does it mean to be an eternal servant of Krishna? How do we act that out in this life? The more we can develop this understanding, along with the understanding of, okay, I'm a spirit soul, I have a material body, I'm in this material world. The way the interactions of this material energy work, the more we can be protected from being exploited. And this is, coming directly from this Yuval Noah Harari, the advisor to Klaus Schwab, who doesn't believe in free will, doesn't believe in God, total atheist, but his advice of knowing thyself is still good advice. And as an interesting side note, in his book Sapiens, he predicted in a roundabout way that the Hare Krishna movement may be the predominant religion of the world within 50 years. He was saying that in the time of Christ, or the time shortly after that, if anyone would have thought that the Christianity would have become the world's religion, within a few decades, within a century or something, no one would have believed it. And he said, it's just like if you were to think that Hare Krishna would be the dominant religion of America or the world in 50 years. It's the same kind of thing, just ridiculous. So maybe, just like in the Krishna book, we hear demons saying things to insult Krishna, but actually they're saying truthful things when you interpret it in a different way. Perhaps Krishna is using this atheistic person to speak some truth, hopefully, about how the Hare Krishna movement was going to become more and more prominent as we transition through this great reset, or whatever you want to call it, that we're going through right now, and ushering in the golden age of Lord Chaitanya. Yeah. So, know thyself as an eternal spirit soul, eternal servant of Krishna, and act with that understanding, and everything will be auspicious. Okay. So I'll end here. Bhagavad Gita as it is. Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.